Hello and welcome back to Gregway Enterprises Week 4 of our 75-week story series covering different topics and strategies and techniques having to do with the world of sales. Today we're going to be talking about being organized. Being organized is a very foundation, very key element to not only everything you'll do in your life, but especially in the world of sales. If you're not organized, if you don't do your homework, if you don't have your ducks in a row, if you don't know exactly what you're going to be doing hour by hour, day by day, week by week, month to month, year to year, and have them written down so that you can see these goals, but have them up here so that you can review them again and again, it's going to be very difficult to get anything accomplished. Oftentimes you hear about people that say, oh, I did this and this and this and this during the day. But what are they really doing? Are they spinning their wheels in the world of sales, or are they actually gaining some traction and actually making some net gain, making some profit, making some money? And there's a lot of different ways that you can go about being organized. Everyone has their own techniques, their own strategies, as evidenced by the story that I'm going to be telling you today about a man which was highly, highly successful. His name was Paul Ream. He lived from 1915 to 2007. And Paul and I spent a lot of time together in the 1980s. When I was Vice President of Marketing for Prestridge Farms Restaurant, one of my obligations and duties was to go to all of the different restaurants and make sure that the marketing, the advertising, everything was in order. And up in West Valley City, Utah, Paul Ream, in that area, he had a ranch and he had a lot of Arabian horses. He was just a Utah fellow and an older man at the time, and he loved to wear a big old cowboy hat. And Paul would carry big, huge wads of money, and we're talking $100 bills, probably $10,000, $20,000 at a time, and drive a little Mercedes, a little 450 SL, and he loved to show off his money. But he was actually a very, very good, down-to-earth guy. He was just very proud of where he came from and what he accomplished. You know, and Paul didn't have much when he started. He didn't have much of anything at all, but he had a dream and he had an idea. But in order to accomplish it, he had to figure out how to obtain product and how to sell it, and how to market it, and how to make it work. Well, I'm going to take you back to, let's say, about 1985, 1984 area. And on my route, visiting all of the different restaurants and doing my follow-up with them and on checking on things, Paul would always be sitting in one of the restaurants, and he would have his meal, and he loved a slice of pie after his meal. And he would come alone, and he would sit alone, and not a lot of people said much to him, simply because they were a little bit maybe in awe or a little bit starstruck or whatever, because, you know, that was Paul Ream. But I'm a pretty sociable guy, and I like everybody, and I'm not intimidated. People are people, and he just seemed like a nice older man. So I alerted the employees that whenever I was in that store, when I was in that area, to make sure to tell me if Paul was if Paul was eating at the time when I was there working, and if I didn't see his vehicle out front. Sometimes he drove an old truck also. So whenever Paul was there, I would find him, and I'd ask him how he was doing, introduce myself to him, and we would visit and talk, and we became acquaintances, then friends, and then it got to be whenever he was there, he would get really excited when I would find him and seek him out. And something that I would always do is I would always go in the back if he hadn't had a slice of pie yet. And this is a true story, and I'd bring out a slice of pie. He loved pie. He loved the cherry and the lemon meringue and all the chocolate, and at holidays he loved the pumpkin pie. And I developed this rapport where he got excited, and it wasn't about saving $1 or $2. I mean, the man was worth millions of dollars. He had, the Ream stores all over. But back in the day when they first started, they were Ream's grocery stores. And we were talking one day because he previously, 2-3 years earlier, he had changed the name from Ream Grocery Stores to the Food Bargain Warehouse. So it would say Ream's Food Bargain Warehouse. And he was commenting on some of the things that I did. And we were talking about being organized and being efficient and being hardworking. And I wanted to know his story. I wanted to know, how it was. And we had just come out of a recession in 1980. And somehow we got on the topic of how difficult it must have been. And he looked at me and he said, "You know what, Greg?" He said, "It's always been difficult." He said, whether there's a recession, whether there's not a recession, it's always been difficult. And he says, I've been able to make the amount of money I've made because I've stayed organized in my finances, and I've stayed organized with my business plan, and I've stayed organized on my payroll and on the things that I do. And then he looked at me and he asked me what I got paid. And I told him what I was getting paid. And he says, if you're worth that to Kent Prestridge, you're worth double that to yourself. And I want to say that to you guys. If you're working for somebody else and you're worth a certain amount of money, always remember you're worth at least double that to yourself. Right? You believe in yourself, you're working for yourself, you're not working for someone else. And that's something which has stuck with me my whole life. We started to talk about organization, and I started to think in my mind, how can this man be driving a beautiful vehicle and own all these properties where the stores were at? That was part of his plan too, that he would always buy the store. And he told me how he would buy the location so he didn't have to lease. And the more I got to know him, the more he would enlighten me and tell me about things. Well, we were on the topic of the recession of 1980 and coming out of that 80 to 82 and how that affected him. And he says, let me tell you something that I learned. And he says, let me tell you how I doubled my wealth during that period of time. So obviously I sat down and I was all ears, and here's this older man, and he's saying to me, he said, when I very first started, I started by just opening up grocery stores, and I would just run them normal. I'd buy the property, and I'd buy the cash registers, and I would buy the food, and I would have extra employees, and I would have everything neat and clean and perfect and organized and everything in order, and just have it just perfect. And he said, you know how much money that cost me? And he said, then one day we had a crew that did not arrive to our store because we had to send them to another location. They had had a flood, or they had had some type of a situation where there weren't the normal people there that would stock the shelves and do the ends and do all of the fronting of the shelves and whatnot. He said, and so I left the big bins out in the aisles. And I put a price on them, and I noticed that people were walking up and buying even more and pulling out of these bins because they were under the impression they were going to get a better price. I mean, this is the gospel truth from Paul Ream. I couldn't even make something like this up. And he says, and all of a sudden I started to realize, I wonder if I did a business model and turned these into a perceived, because it's all about perception. When you're selling, it's about perception, and it's about technique. So his technique of being organized and how he went about it, he says, I wonder if I was to do a business model and open up in an older part of town and open up in an older store and just bring everything in bins and leave everything in bins and call it Ream's Food Bargain Warehouse, how that would go over. He said, so I tried it. And he says, I left everything out in the aisles. I left everything out in the bins. I brought in all of my old cash registers. It looked ratty, disgusting. It was just a bargain bin warehouse. And he said the people went nuts. And this is where I was really shocked, and I'll never forget this either. He said, then I decided to try something. He said, I was selling everything at the normal price that I was before, but I wasn't having to pay all these employees to organize it and do the shelves and have everything perfect and the floors mopped and everything clean. I just had it looking basically like a swap meet. He said, so I thought I would try adding 10% on at the register. He looked me in the eye and he said to me, I did that and I added 10% onto the register. And he says, you know what, Greg? No one said a word. And so he started converting all of his stores into the Ream's Food Bargain Warehouse, where when you go through, you buy the food, and anyone in Utah can tell you this, you pay an extra 10% because they're under the perception that they're getting wholesale bargain right out of the bin, and they're saving so much money that adding 10% off on at the end didn't matter. So this week, as I was thinking about my story, because each week I kind of look in advance what the story is going to be the topic for the next week that I'm doing this, I was thinking, how can we apply this to sales? Well, Paul Ream was in sales, wasn't he? He was selling food. But he had to figure out a way to do it bigger and better and a perception of cheaper than the competition. So his form of organization, in essence, was having things just look like a mess, but behind the scenes, financially, highly organized. And he took that money and he continued to build and build and build and build and build his empire. So it was Paul and Ruby Ream, and they lived over towards West Valley City, had the ranch. In 2007, he passed away. He donated a park, some property that we now have, a Paul Ream Park. I don't live in that area, but in that area. And what a wonderful man. And he taught me, and he was a catalyst, and one of the main factors, one of the deciding factors that helped push me to do my own thing. If you're worth this amount to Kent Prestridge, you're worth double to yourself. So I look in this camera and say to you, no matter what you're making, doesn't matter if you're making $100,000 a year, $80,000 a year, $40,000 a year, whatever you're making for someone else, I guarantee you, if you do the math on it, you're worth double that to yourself. You just have to have something to sell. Therefore, if any of you out there ever want to go in the marketing or advertising business, I traveled the country for over 16 years putting people into my business. Be happy to help you. Teach you sales strategies, techniques. You can use my advertising marketing programs. Begin your own business. And you make an average of $2,000 your first week, profit, and you work till noon each day. Just saying. So just putting a plug in for that. But the most important thing that I want you to do is go back on these videos, like them, share them, subscribe, do everything you guys know how to do with social media. But if it can't help you, find someone that you know. Find someone that you know in the world of sales that you want to help. You want to help them polish their skills, whether they're young, whether they're old, whether they're seasoned veteran, whether they're starting over, whether the recession that we're in right now, no matter what we're dealing with, has hurt them. Have them watch these. Go back to the 25-week series. You can find me at gregwayenterprises.com or gregway@gmail.com. That's my email. Well, gregwayenterprises@gmail.com. So my goal is to help you guys, is to just simply say, look, here to help you, here to teach you the sales strategies and techniques. If you will get fine-tuned and review them and study them and take notes on them and be disciplined on them and stay organized. Say, you know what, I'm going to watch one video a week, or I'm going to take 15 minutes a day and I'm going to watch one of those and I'm going to take notes. If you have comments, if you need me, if there's something that I can do to help you, please contact me. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you guys are being safe. We're going to have another video posted every Monday by 5 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. Just know that I'm there for you, and I look forward to doing the next video and for the next 72 weeks going forward. Have a great week. Don't take no for an answer. Be relentless. We'll talk to you then. Goodbye.